the legendary and outstanding play-by-play voice of the Steelers. Bill, welcome. It's so great to have you back.
Good to be with you, Steve. I'd rather be in Buffalo than in Kansas City, I'll tell you that.
And that's the first time I ever heard that in January.
It probably will never happen again, but they're talking about global warming. I don't think that's a great example of it.
No, I would not put that up before here. Hey, here's this one. Check it out. I want to start with Mason Rudolph. You've called every snap of his career. So my observation leading into a question will be from 30,000 feet. But it just seems to me in watching him, he seems like a calmer version in the pocket of Mason Rudolph. Yes or no?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. He, first of all, as a veteran of that many years in the league, even though many of those moments were spent watching rather than receiving snaps, he understands what it takes to be a winning quarterback. And you know what? I've always said, don't beat yourself. There are a couple of examples of very average quarterbacks winning Super Bowls. I don't have to name names, but we know who they are because they didn't beat themselves. And I think he knows that, understands it perfectly. And, I watched him as a junior and a senior at Oklahoma State. He and James Thomas destroyed Pitt the one year. And then the other year they won the game as well, but he wasn't as great. But I knew he had great potential, and I was happy they drafted him.
Well, look, it's not as if I haven't been around Mike Yurcich the last 3 years, who was Mason's quarterback coach and coordinator at Oklahoma State. He always told me great things about him. Is he seeing the field better, and what has that offensive line meant to his ability to see the field?
Well, and I think it's all a hand-in-glove thing. The offensive line has made him comfortable because he has the option of running the football, and it's not all on him. They've run the football really well the last part of the season, and I'm on Mike Tomlin's bandwagon when he says, you have to run the football in December and January because of the elements, and I think we're going to see an example of that on Sunday in Buffalo, in that hole in a farm up there in Orchard Park, and that's exactly what it is. They dug a hole in a farm. Put stands in, and that wind, it comes in across the surface, but then it gets down into that bowl, and it can be nasty. You remember, and I think it might have been Harry Newsom, Steeler punter years ago, hitting a negative punt.
Yep.
Hitting the punt into the wind, and it ended up hitting behind him. I mean, and you're afraid of that, especially since, Presley Harvin III hasn't had the best of years. But I noticed that the Steelers have put Brad Wing on the practice squad, so we'll see how that plays out.
I have to ask you about no T.J. Watt because he's been ruled out of this game, and it's not as if it's the first time they've ever had to play without him. But how do they compensate? Because there are certain players I think that benefit when he's out there that they get singled up instead of doubled or chipped. So how do they compensate without him out there?
Well, as we saw with the safety position, which was decimated this year, at outside linebacker, we have depth all of a sudden with Nick Herbig, and Marcus Golden played his best game last week.
He did.
And so, I think you have depth there, but you're going to miss T.J. Watt. The record speaks for itself. Their record without him is not very good. And, it's not one person who can take his place. It's going to have to be done by committee and also scheming. But fortunately, at that outside backer position, they can afford a hit, albeit as big as T.J. Watt.
When I had you on in the preseason, I asked you about Joey Porter Jr., and you said, Steve, he'll play, but he'll work his way in and then really play, and he can help. Now you've seen a full season of him. What has been your thought watching him play?
He's the best shutdown corner we've had in quite a while. And, his tackling, he knows it's got to get better, but it's pretty good right now. And he's done a great job. So that'll be an interesting matchup on Sunday. Joey Porter Jr. and Stephon Diggs. That's who I'm sure he'll get as a guy on the other side of the line. I'm not sure that Gabe Davis is going to play, but they still have other receivers But, in that kind of weather, I think the Steelers have to worry about Buffalo's ability to run. James Cook, 4.7. And guess who their second leading rusher is? Josh Allen, 4.7. Yeah. So they're going to have to contain that part of it in order to have a chance to win. Josh
Allen gave us the Josh Allen thrill ride on Sunday night. 3 turnovers and then big plays. I mean, he is a thrill. He is a thrill ride.
Yeah, he is, and he's a gunslinger, and he doesn't care. I mean, 18 interceptions is not something you write home about.
Right.
But when you look at his rushing touchdowns combined with his passing touchdowns, I think that the number is 44, which is off the chart.
Well, let me ask you. I mean, you've seen him play. I mean, what do you like about him, and what are a couple things that, if you were a Buffalo fan, would make you antsy?
They have some designed runs for him, but he doesn't look to run. He's looking downfield, and those eyes are downfield, and then he just has that knack for, it's time now, go. And, sometimes he can get loose in that secondary and be a load, and he's not easy to tackle because he's a big man. He is a problem, and they're going to have to figure out a way to slow him down.
There's no question about that. What about the tight end part of it? Thompson blocked well. We know Pat's been the better pass receiver. Then conversely, Dalton Kincaid out of Utah and Dawson Knox. In a game in conditions and considering the kind of routes that tight ends run, how important can they be in this game on Sunday?
Yeah, they can be important, but again, are you going to, on a windy day in Buffalo with maybe some snow flurries or snow showers, are you going to live and die with the passing game? I doubt that.
Right.
But yes, they are blessed at tight end, and Kincaid is the real threat because he's not the prototype tight end as is Dawson Knox. He's more of that flex tight end, that big receiver. And he's somebody you have to pay attention to.
Yeah, because I mean,
I think we have to stop the running game or slow it down, and then make Josh Allen throw the ball, and then hope for the best.
Yeah, I mean, because obviously Kincaid was on that Utah group that Penn State played last year in the Rose Bowl. So I mean, you see how good he is, and this guy, in high school didn't even play 2 years of high school football. He was like, okay, I'll take it up. Then he went to the University of San Diego. Really interesting route to get there. What's made Harris and Warren effective in conjunction with the offensive line?
I think the phrase thunder and lightning applies. 2 different styles of running. You just love the way Jaylen Warren hits the hole. You love the way he spins. And he's got great balance. I'm sure if he wanted to be a great golfer, he could be a great golfer because of that great balance. And Najee, well, you have to deal with Najee, not only his obvious physical talent, change of direction, strong legs, but you have to deal with his demeanor. And I've noticed the last 6 games he has run angry. And you got to love that because he doesn't want to run around you. He wants to meet you and knock you down. And I think, his stiff arm can be devastating. I just love the way he's come in to this part of the season as, I think, one of the top running backs in the whole game.
Isaac Seumalo is not allowed a sack all season. I mean, and I know you're following the ball, Bill, but you see enough video and so forth. What's made him really good inside?
He's got an indomitable spirit. He wants to not only block you, but he wants to embarrass you. And I just love that. And he also plays hurt. He was hurt last week, didn't practice, I don't think, at all, and then played a fine game in Baltimore. So that's one of the best acquisitions that we've seen. And next to him is Dan Moore Jr. Dan has struggled. I see Pro Football Focus has him as the 5th lowest rated tackle in the league. He's allowed, 50-some pressures and a bunch of sacks. But, I think you worry about that position next year. You just do the best you can. This year, and I think having Seumalo next to him has really helped him.
Yeah, and he has been a heck of a player for him, no question. You talked about the secondary play. We mentioned Joey. What kind of job have they done, for the most part, holding up, considering they've had to put so many pieces together to make it hold up?
Yeah, I think for a while, Steve, they were giving up the middle of the field too easily.
Yeah.
And tight ends were feasting. And I think they've kind of, cut that down recently. But it's something to watch for if Allen really tries to take advantage of the middle of the field. But having KZ back, I think, is tremendous. I know he's probably got a little rust to shake off, but knowing him, he's probably going to, he's going to play above the line. And I just, I think Miles Killebrew jumped in there and did his best. I love Eric Rowe. I hope he's going to be available this week. We'll see the practice report later today. And Elijah Riley. So you're okay there now. I mean, for as hard hit as that position has been injury-wise, a lot of them have stepped up.
You know Mike Tomlin as well as anybody. Veteran coach, been through it, won a Super Bowl. What does his intelligence and demeanor, what does that mean to a team that gets them to this point when a lot of people thought they might not get there? And, of course, the world is firing slings and arrows at him as he's doing it.
In his own quiet way, he demands respect. Let's say compared to Bill Cowher, who would treat his players, with a stiff arm, if you understand what I mean.
I know.
I think Tomlin knows he doesn't have to do that. And as a result, he has their respect. I think they'd run through a wall for him. And I think if you talk to every one of them, they'd say that he's the best coach they've ever had. And, all this elevator noise and outside interference that had taken place when they were in that losing streak, it's kind of disappeared because I think everybody realizes this guy's one of the best coaches that you can have. And if you don't believe that, let him go and see how quickly he's snatched up by somebody else.
You got that right.
That's going to happen. Yeah. And I've seen those rumors. Well, and we live in this age of, it used to be there were 3 television cameras at Chuck Noll's news conference.
Yep.
Well, that has changed, and there's a lot more .coms. There's a lot more people involved, and unfortunately, in my opinion, Steve, the journalism part has slipped, and it's all about clickbait, and I don't like that. But it is what it is. But I think Tomlin is great at shutting that out and getting his players to do the same thing.
See, it's one of the many things I admire about him. He just knows who he is, and that's okay. And it doesn't matter what somebody else says. I know who I am. I have a lot of respect for that. My last question is going to be not about the Steelers, but about Pitt. I had the privilege of calling all of Paul Posluszny's games at Penn State, and he ended up getting into the College Football Hall of Fame this week.
Yes.
You had the privilege of calling all of Larry Fitzgerald's games at Pitt. He is the 25th Pitt player to make the College Football Hall of Fame. What are your thoughts on seeing that and the kind of college player he was that you witnessed on an every Saturday basis?
Every coach at every level of football should show his players Larry Fitzgerald's tapes, if only for one reason. He catches the ball in the end zone and he turns and hands it to the official.
Yep.
Act like you've been there before. And I think that would be a great lesson. But unfortunately, because of the pressures of national TV, highlights, players get into the end zone and they got to do a dance and they got to do the synchronized swimming, I call it. And, it's a shame, but, he was the antithesis of what we see now in all of football. And what I remember of him as a player, when the ball's in the air, he knew exactly where it was going to come down, better than anybody else on the field.
Yeah.
And he always managed to be there when it came down. And with his, strong hands and great leaping ability and all of the God-given physical gifts, it's no wonder that he's in the College Hall of Fame, and I think it's only a matter of time for Canton as well.
Yeah, exactly. He'll get in Canton as well. But, what a great privilege, because you would have loved to have been sitting with me on the bus when Jack Ham was talking to the defensive players about what the draft used to be like. Oh, about a month after you got drafted, there's no combine or anything like that. They're all like their jaws all drop. Larry Fitzgerald's 40 time is reported at 4.63. Really? Okay, that's a football player. Okay, I don't really need to watch to know he's great.
Absolutely. And, when James Harrison intercepted that pass in Super Bowl 43, Larry Fitzgerald was showing you that he's faster than 4.6 on a football field. And he darn near caught him before he got to the goal line. Again, Steve, give me 22 good football players. I don't care what position they play. I'll win a lot of games.
That's why Bill and I always get along so great. We always think the same way. Bill, thanks so much. Appreciate you. Hey, great broadcast on Sunday, and hopefully it's a great day for the Steelers.
I'm taking a space heater just in case.
That's why you're a veteran. Thanks, Bill. My best to your great family.
All right, Steve. All right.
Bring in best in the business, Peter King. Welcome, my friend. Great to have you back.
Steve Jones, you got a big tilt with the Wildcats tonight.
Yeah, and they're playing well, my man. They're playing really well. So it'll be a fun game tonight. Fun game.
Yeah, good. Are the students back?
The students are back. That's why Penn State played its game against Michigan in the Palestra in Philadelphia Sunday. It was sold out, but the students weren't back on campus. That's why you make that move like that. So
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Boy, that's a cool atmosphere. How did how was it at the Palestra? Did you like it?
Oh, I've done maybe 30 plus games in there, Peter.
Oh my gosh,
and when you sit in there, and Dick and I refer to it as the corners. Look at the corners. If the corners of the Palestra are filled, that means the place is going to be electric because every seat's taken. Well, the corners were filled. It was a great atmosphere. Just what you hope for.
That's great. Yeah, fantastic.
We'll start with Pete.
Well, we got some playoffs going on, Steve.
Yeah, 7 out of the 14 teams are new, Pete. Because, Peter, I looked 7 out of 14 new in this. Before I do get to that, the story about Pete Carroll and the Seahawks.
Yeah.
That's the one that's breaking. So your thoughts on a guy that had a great run there.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised because, remember, when Pete Carroll went to Seattle, all right, if you think about sort of his road, okay, he got to Seattle in 2010. And the crazy thing is, Pete Carroll's 72 now. He was in his 50s when he took over this job. And so he takes over this job. And remember, he hired John Schneider, the general manager. He didn't do it alone. He and Paul Allen basically hired John Schneider. And so, but it was clear. Pete Carroll was the number one dude there. But I think what has happened, honestly, that in the last 3 years, they go 7-10 with Russell Wilson, 9-8, 9-8 without him. And they're not a playoff factor. They made the playoffs last year, but didn't win. And they just don't seem like the arrow is pointing up. And I think the Seahawks view this as a time to start fresh and to get a new coach, a younger coach. I think a lot of the same thing is happening right now in New England, where I would be surprised if there's a bridge built, with Bill Belichick. We'll see. But, and again, I at the risk of sounding like I'm guilty of ageism, because I'm not. Pete Carroll is an energetic, boisterous guy. But, the fact is, let's look at this honestly. The fact is that he and Bill Belichick have run programs that 6 and 8 and 10 years ago were highly successful. That, they're both Super Bowl winning coaches. And in the last 3 or 4 years, they haven't been successful, particularly New England. I mean, Bill Belichick is 9 games under 500 since Tom Brady walked off campus. So at some point, I do think, with all due respect to the greatness, particularly of Belichick, but also of Pete Carroll, this is a what have you done for me lately game. And really, that's what the business world is. When I'm done, they'll give you my gold watch, say thanks for the memories, but we're moving on to the next guy. And that's That's how this world works, and I think that's how, again, assuming that Belichick is gone, and I think he will be, that it happens this way.
Yeah, it's interesting because I remember doing the 2008 Rose Bowl. Pete Carroll was in his late 50s doing that game.
Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah.
I mean, think back that far. When you look at Sean McDermott, who weathered an interesting reveal about something he said in 2019, but he's been in charge of his defense this year, and he doesn't have Matt Milano and he doesn't have White. And we can argue whether they're two of their top 5 defensive players somewhere in there. In reality, what kind of job has he actually done as the coach of the team?
Well, I think there would be a lot of fans who would say, you have the absolute prime of one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the game.
Yep.
Not only haven't you won a Super Bowl, you haven't gotten to one. And look, what I would say is that, to that, I think a lot of people might say that if you take the top 4 quarterbacks in the game right now, they might take Mahomes, Burrow, Josh Allen, and Lamar Jackson in some order, and they're all in the AFC. So it's not that easy to get to a Super Bowl.
Right.
But I also think that, my opinion anyway, is that I think he's done an above-average job. He hasn't done a great job, but I think he's done an above-average job, particularly when you talk about, look, if you look at what this team has done, and I covered their game on Sunday in Miami, and after the game, you go around the locker room, and there's all these guys who played huge roles in this game. Deontay Hardy, who they get in free agency, a kid from Assumption College in Massachusetts.
What's that?
They get him. He had played for the Saints a little bit, and he gets the huge return for a touchdown. And then you have other guys, Christian Benford, who's making a huge play, and obviously, the weird one I thought was, above all, when Leonard Fournette basically personally pushed Josh Allen in for a first down, a huge first down in the fourth quarter. So I think they have managed their roster. He and Brandon Beane have managed their roster well. Had to overcome a lot of hurdles to be good, and I think they've done a pretty good job. But again, I agree with those who would say he's fallen short in some ways. Clock management, obviously, against Kansas City, might have cost them a shot at the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And so he's not perfect in any way. But I think with all the obstacles he's had in the last 12 months, going back to dealing with DeMar Hamlin, that whole thing, I think he's done a good job. I wouldn't say a great job, but I'd say a good job.
So, and since you covered the Dolphins-Bills game the other night, Joe Brady was a grad assistant here at Penn State for a couple of years, so I know Joe a little bit.
Yeah.
What kind of job has he done once he was moved in and Ken Dorsey was moved out?
I think what happened is that when Ken Dorsey was in there, I think one of the things he was missing, was that little bit of imagination that Brian Daboll had. He was a little bit of a paint-by-numbers guy. And we're going to do it as we've done it. And sometimes when you have problems and you don't have solutions, players look at you and say, well, geez, come on, we gotta figure something out. Joe Brady is not short on ideas. Right. You're going back to the year he coached Joe Burrow at LSU. I think he gets that somewhat anyway from Sean Payton. When he was on the Saints staff, he was a low-level guy there. Right. And Sean Payton is a nutty professor. I'm telling you, I've been in a Saturday night meeting 5 years ago with Peyton in New Orleans, and I saw it. And that guy's crazy. He just comes up with stuff. And if Drew Brees is literally comes up with something new on Saturday night and asks Brees, and Brees says, "Yeah, let's do it," and they just do it. So I think Joe Brady believes that when we are stuck, there's a reason that you have a coach there. The coach has to figure this stuff out and not just bang your head against the wall and say, "Let's practice harder."
Yeah. So I'll move off the Bills for a moment. I know you work for NBC. What is the league's thought on Peacock and the fact that it's the Dolphins and Chiefs on Saturday night?
Well, I've told this to a bunch of people this week, Steve, and look, I know that fans have got to be spitting angry about having to pay $6 to watch a playoff game, because that's in essence what it is. If you go sign up for Peacock, I think it's $5.95 or something like that, and if you choose to, you can cancel after a month.
Right.
So, you can hang on to it for a couple of weeks, see if it's anything you're interested in, and then if you choose, you can cancel. So in essence, what they're saying to you is you need to pay $5.95 to see Chiefs Dolphins. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people are upset about that. I can tell you exactly why it is. This is not NBC strong-arming the NFL, not NBC, begging for the game.
Right.
Here's exactly what happened. Roger Goodell is convinced, and underline that, capital C, that streaming is going to be a gigantic way of doing business in the media sector in the next television contract, which is still like 6 years away. Mm-hmm. But they have an opener in 2027, which they could use, but anyway, they've got a few years, but he's convinced that streaming is the way because of what is happening in television. Look at all the people cutting the cord. For those who don't pay attention to such stuff, and I'm not a TV nerd about it or anything like that, but in essence, in the last 10 years, about half the television homes in America no longer have cable TV.
Right.
And that is only going to grow. And what they're doing now is they're signing up for all these streaming services and, like YouTube TV and all that stuff. And so Goodell is convinced that this is the way of the future. And so he's not giving them Cleveland, Houston. He's giving them one of the 2 or 3 big games this weekend. Now, Fox would have an open revolt if the Cowboys went in that slot. They were never going in that slot.
Right.
But they figure that this is a very attractive game. A lot of people will be interested, and we think a lot of people will pay and just use this as a way to examine Peacock. But you're right, Steve. I don't think you even said it, but I know what you're thinking, that there's a lot of people who are up in arms about this who don't like it, and I totally understand. But it's just, I think this is going to happen more and more in the future.
Now I'll get to the question that many people want to hear an answer to, and I know you don't have an answer to it. What is the deal with the Eagles?
My feeling about the Eagles, and again, last week you heard A.J. Brown, you heard a couple of guys really staunchly defend Nick Sirianni. Okay, and I heard him, and then I did not watch the game against the Giants, but you know what I did? I was working on my column in the press box in Miami, and I had my AirPods in, and I'm listening to Merrill Reese and Mike Quick.
Yep.
And I mean, you talk about they were doing the game, and it's like their dog just died.
Yeah.
I mean, they were despondent over the Eagles, and it's clear to me that there's, in an attitude way, in a motivation way, right now. You just saw Mike Vrabel get a team with half the talent of the Philadelphia Eagles in a meaningless game get all ratcheted up and fired up, and they beat the Jacksonville Jaguars, who were winning in to win the division, and they have a home game in the playoffs. And Tennessee is 5-11 going into that game. So, coaches matter. And look, I'm not there. I'm not in the locker room. I believe that a lot of the guys on this team have tuned out their coach. And I don't know why. I can't explain it, but I also think they held on to a bunch of aging players too long. The one other thing is, when you pick guys like Jalen Carter, who are extremely talented, but have major attitude and motivation question marks coming out of college.
Yes.
When you pick those guys, you're taking a chance. And look, Jalen Carter midway through the season seemed like a shoo-in for Defensive Rookie of the Year. I just turned my ballot in today. He was number 3 on my list. And, Jalen Carter hasn't made a play in 6 weeks. So why? Why does this happen? I think that the coaching has to bear the brunt and will bear the brunt. I'm not saying they're going to fire Nick Sirianni, but I think they're going to clean house of a lot of assistant coaches on this team.
Interesting, because it's funny. I was listening to Arizona, Philadelphia, because I'd done the Peach Bowl, and then I'd flown back to BWI the next day, and I was driving back from Baltimore to State College. Same thing, listening to Maryland Mike, as Arizona's racking up 39 minutes of possession. I mean, the two of them were just
apoplectic.
It's exactly the word I was about to use. It was crazy.
Yeah.
So and nobody knows what's going on with anything.
Yeah, I think changes are coming.
Yeah.
And look, if they lay down in Tampa, I'm not saying he's going to get fired, but I think Sirianni's got to walk into his meeting with Howie Roseman and Jeff Lurie next Tuesday, Wednesday, whenever it is, a little nervous. I would be if I were him.
Yeah. Finally, I do have to ask you about Pittsburgh. The Steelers will play without T.J. Watt. Mason Rudolph has stepped in, and he hasn't had, any turnovers along the way. Does he just, when you just watch him, even if it's on TV, seem like a calmer presence back there compared to the Mason Rudolph we saw before?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to put it. I love listening to Mason Rudolph after the game in these on-field interviews, because he's basically saying, hey, what did I have to lose? I was nothing on this team. I had no chance on this team, and they put me in as a last gasp. So what, am I going to be panicky? Am I going to be worse than the guys who've been before me? And he doesn't say that, but that's clearly what he's inferring. And honestly, when you think about it, Steve, and you just listen to him and you watch him play, he realizes, I have nothing to lose.
Right.
And I'm just going to play football. If it's good enough, it's good enough. And if not, I'll go be an insurance salesman in Davenport, Iowa, or whatever. I don't even know where he's from. but my point is that, he's a good guy. Players on the team like him. He comes to work. He works hard every day. And he finally said, hey, listen, I got my shot now, and you're going to get the best I have. I can't see them giving Buffalo much of a game on Sunday, but that's why they play the games. Funny things can happen, and if Josh Allen is in turnover mode, or mistake mode, you never know. But I would be surprised if Buffalo didn't win this game.
Which game do you have this weekend?
I actually have 2. I'm going to Houston to see the Browns and Texans early Saturday, and then I'm getting up Sunday morning, and I'm going to fly to Detroit. I love that Rams-Lions game Sunday night. So I'm going to do both and let the chips fall and see what I write about.
2 domes. Hey, I'll just very quick. That day I know I got to let you go. But I got to give Stefanski a lot of credit. People forget Nick Chubb was the centerpiece of what they were doing, both in play action and just running the ball. And they haven't had him for months, and it's almost like it's been forgotten, and they're still winning. Wow. That tells
Here's
a lot.
the thing about Stefanski. The thing about Stefanski that I really like is that I talked to him a couple of times this year after games, or once in camp and once after a game. And he is the calmest dude on the planet. And I talked to him after, all the losses that he's had and Deshaun being gone and all that other stuff. I think he's done a marvelous job. I really do. And I think the ironic thing about this game this weekend is that Houston and Cleveland are playing a playoff game, and Deshaun Watson is going to be nowhere in sight.
Yep.
It's just totally bizarre that C.J. Stroud and Joe Flacco are the two quarterbacks in this game. And if you ask Houston, they're very glad to have C.J. Stroud long-term over Deshaun Watson. And I will guarantee you that deep down, because when Deshaun Watson got hurt, they're not sure. He's finished 40% of his contract now, Steve. And the Cleveland Browns do not know whether he's their long-term quarterback. He hasn't proven anything in his 12 starts. And then, now you look at it, and there's no question in my mind that they feel more confident right now with Joe Flacco playing than Deshaun Watson, and that is a pretty damning indictment on Deshaun Watson.
Peter, you're the best. Appreciate you so much. You know that. Thanks so much for the time you gave us today.
Hey, you're welcome, Steve. You have a great weekend.
Thanks. Peter